Hello BookTube, I'm Heather and this is Recently Seen Reading, and welcome to No Borrow September. No Borrow September. What is No Borrow September? Well, it's a private little thing I do for myself. Well, it's not so private if I'm telling you about it, but every 3 or 4 months I have a reckoning with myself in which I have to come to terms with the fact that I have borrowed more books than I am actually reading. So at the beginning of September, on the 1st of September, I counted how many books I had borrowed from various libraries, both in print and in electronic form, and it was 30 or 31 books. And that's excessive. I'm not getting through them. Why? Why do I have 30 unread library books in my home? And how can I fix this? Well, I've learned that the only way that I can fix this is not to borrow any books for a month. This often happens in the run-up to a gift-giving occasion, so the pause in my borrowing gives people some breathing room to pick a book out for me for a gift-giving season or event. But I've got out of hand over the summer, totally out of hand. So why and how does this happen? Well, why it happens is that I have the attention span of a squirrel and become interested in far too many things far too frequently. And I will have books sitting on my shelf because I am interested in and I am going to get to them. But they're not mine. I have to give them back. The other thing that causes this is that I'm very fortunate. I can borrow books from 2 libraries in the city. One is an academic library, which will get any book I want from any of the other dozen academic libraries in the province, whenever I want. And I can have those books for a term, so for 4 months, and then I can renew them for another 2 terms so that I can have in my possession academic library books for at least a year in my possession and unread. The other thing that contributes to this beyond generous loan policies is the public library's no-fine policy. I can borrow books for 3 weeks, print books for 3 weeks, then renew them for 3 weeks, and then renew them for another 3 weeks. What is that? 9 weeks? And then keep them even longer without paying a fine. I try not to do that, but it's within the realm of the possible. And since it's within the realm of the possible, I now have a shelf, that shelf, right there, that has about 30 print books on it that I've had in my possession. Well, some of them for just a week or 2, but some of them for nearly a year. So it's time to get to it. I am on a no borrow books from any libraries. Will I succeed at this? Probably not. But can I get halfway? Can I get from 30 borrowed and unread books down to 15 borrowed and unread books? Probably. Let me see. I hate TBR lists, piles of possibilities lists. I hate them for myself. I draw them up all the time. All the time. I've got lists. I've got lists and lists and lists. They are like the books I borrow from libraries. They proliferate, but I don't get through them. Put a book on a list, and I'm not likely to read it. It's the most irritating thing about my personality, or well, one of the most irritating things about my personality. My moods and my interests shift so much across the course of a month, it feels impossible to get through the books on my reading list, or in a read-along, or a long-term reading plan. But we're going to tackle it. We're going to tackle it this month. We're going to get through some of these books. So I'm going to grab some and talk to you a little bit about what books I have in this random selection of books from the library. Let me just grab a couple. I have a couple of books from a current front list. I've got, let's see, how can I arrange these in a way that doesn't blind you with the glare? I've got Joan by Katherine Chen and Trees by Percival Everett. 2 novels I picked up because they're on the front list and people have praised them. They sounded interesting to me. Let's see, what else do I have? Let's see. I have 1, 2, I'm not going to pull all of these books out. I have 2 relatively short books that I can probably get through, at least one of them for Shorty September. Both are books I picked up for Women in Translation and didn't finish. Autopsy of a Boring Wife by Marie Leroy and Hurricane Season by Fernanda Melchior. You probably heard about Hurricane Season, but not Autopsy of a Boring Wife. Let's see what else. I've got a couple random history books. These 2. Let's see. Put these in a little pile. These are The Story of Jane by Laura Kaplan, and what's the actual title? Dinner with Joseph Johnson. Story of Jane is the history of a group of women in Chicago performing abortions illegally and providing abortion services at a time pre-Wade. And Dinner with Joseph Johnson is about a key late 18th, early 19th century publisher in London. That's a book that came out pretty recently. Now, I think if I pull everything out of here, it's going to be catastrophic. I'll put images up instead. I have a stack of about 12 books that I think I'm going to get through. Some of them for Shorty September. I've got, let's see, Brown Girls, which I think was on the Carol Shields prize list. Into the Riverlands, Revolutionary Letters by Diane Prima, Double Hook by Sheila Watson, Heliodora, Poems by H.D., got Palace of the Peacock by Wilson Harris, Untouchable, Account of Dalits in India by Mulk Anand, got Swamp Angel by Ethel Wilson, mid-century Canadian novel. Yarn Spinning, it's a book about how to spin yarn because I want to get back into some handcraft work. Body Work by Melissa Febos, which is about the challenge of writing memoir. The Property of a Gentleman, a collection by Robin Myers, which is about the history of book collecting. The Carnegie Corporation and the Development of American College Libraries. It's a shorty, but I doubt that anyone else is ever going to read it except me. It's by Robin Radford. So that's a group of short books that maybe I can squeeze into Shorty September. I'll just skip the prompts. I'll just wedge them into September and call it Shorty September. And I've got a stack of 6 or 7 books that are kind of part of my reading of the backlist. I've got Childhood by Alexis, a novel that came out in the early 2000s, late 1990s. Oreo by Fran Ross, which is from the 70s. Just Above My Head, James Baldwin's last novel, which I'm kind of dreading reading because it will mean that I've finished all of Baldwin's novels. Dusty Answer by Rosamund Lehman. I've never read Lehman. I don't know why I borrowed that from the library. Who knows? The Passage to India by Ian Forster. Lightning Rods by Helen DeWitt. And that's all a kind of backlist group. And I'll get through a couple of those. Maybe 3, because the Forster and the DeWitt are in read-along that I'm participating in, so those will most definitely get read. Then there's a stack of books that I find fascinating because they're related to my research, but will be unlikely to interest anybody else. Organizing Women by Christine Pauley, who writes about library history and about the role of women in establishing libraries as community institutions in the 20s and 30s and 40s. So all of the effort those women put in that is now being dismantled, particularly in the United States, by right-wing forces. Book Madness by Denise Gigante, which is about bibliomania in the first half of the 19th century, why people are constantly buying books, or in my case, borrowing books. It's a book about Canadian history, Canada, 1922 to 1939, decades of discourse. So it's a history of that short period of time before and during the Depression. The second volume of the history of the book in Canada. Probably not going to read that entirely. I'll probably read 3 or 4 chunks of it. Thomas Tansel's book, that's I think probably referred to as magisterial. It's called descriptive bibliography. Again, I probably won't read that entire thing. I'll probably just dip into it to make sure that I've got things straight in my head about how descriptive bibliography works. And collecting, curating, and researching a writer's library. Okay, more library history. This one's by Richard Oram, and is about the mechanics and principles of collecting a specific writer's books. And finally, I have Elizabeth MacDonald's University Women, which is an account of women's movement into the universities of Canada in the 1870s and 90s. I'm just have had my toe dipped into that one. So the most interesting thing I've kind of had consolidated for me already in that book is the thing that makes Canadian women's post-secondary education history different from both American and British history is that a women's college system didn't develop here. Canadians went straight into co-education, and I think her book is going to argue that that is actually a far more radical proposition and ended up with more pushback as a result. So that's the ridiculous list of books I have borrowed from the library. Yes, I went through that too quickly. It doesn't matter, you know, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to finish them all, right? Absolutely no way I'm going to finish them. I have, since I'm filming this on the 3rd or the 4th, what day is it? It's the 4th. I've finished some already. Go me. I have finished, which ones have I finished? Into the Riverlands by Nghi, which I found kind of thin and disappointing. I read Diane de Prima's Revolutionary Letters, which is a series of poems. This is the 1974 version. She kept editing it as she went through her life. Really interesting. I'll probably talk about that one a little bit more. And I think I finished, yes I did, Alexis's childhood novel, which I enjoyed, especially the section set in Ottawa. It's so rare that I read a book in which Ottawa is praised as a beautiful place to live. It's often a very difficult place to live for most people, for all kinds of reasons. It's a bureaucratic city. And I'm part way through, I think. Yes, I'm more than halfway through Katherine Chen's Joan. So, starting off strong. I've got, what, 3? That's 30, what, 10% of this ridiculous list done? But they're also really short. But we shall see. So, yes, this is a problem of my own making. But no borrow. No borrow September. If I can manage, no borrow September. Even if I can only make it to the 15th with no borrow. Why am I pointing? I will succeed at this ridiculous challenge I have to post for myself every 3 or 4 months because I have no self-discipline when it comes to borrowing library books. You show me a library, I will figure out how to get a library card and I will borrow all of your books. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And I've been this way since I was 5 years old. I've always had more books borrowed from the library than I can possibly read. And I hope you do too. Get a library card. Use your library. Your library wants to help you. And I'm just going to go off and on about the wonderful, amazing thing that libraries can bring to you and to a community. And the amount of effort it took to establish public libraries across the world. It took an enormous amount of effort and labor, political will, and cunning on the part of the women who made that happen. So I would encourage you, go get a library card. Get 1, get 2, get as many as you can. Talk other people into it. Go to attend the library board meeting. That's it for me. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.